They say when the world breaks you, you either run towards silence or away from it. I chose silence. That's how I ended up on a crooked mountain trail, backpack damp with sweat, my boots chewing through patches of frost and pine needles, following directions scrawled in ink so faded it looked like someone had written them decades ago. Maybe they had. The letter had arrived without a return address. Just my name, George Holbrook, typed neatly on the envelope, as if the sender knew I'd open it before throwing the rest of my mail into the bin. Inside was a single piece of paper, yellowed and brittle. Come to the Monastery of the Hollow Heart. The quiet awaits you. Underneath was a set of directions that didn't match any online map. And yet, here I was 3 days into my hike, miles from anything resembling a town, trudging up the last bend of a path that seemed to vanish into the clouds. I wasn't sure what I expected when I reached the top. A ruin, maybe. Something crumbling and sad, abandoned long ago by the last soul to believe in anything sacred. Instead, the monastery stood tall and still, its black stone walls slick with mist, its towers scraping against a sky the color of old bruises. It wasn't crumbling. It was waiting. The main gate was open, not wide, but just enough to suggest I was expected. I hesitated at the threshold. No sound, no birds, not even wind. Just the deep breath of the mountain behind me, and the heavy hush that pressed against my ears like cotton. I stepped inside. The stone underfoot was worn smooth. Cold traveled up my spine from the soles of my boots. The courtyard was empty, save for a single wooden bench and a well whose rope had rotted away. Moss grew like veins along the walls. I smelled iron in the air, sharp and earthy, like old blood on a coin. Then I saw him. A man in a dark robe stood near the far archway, hands folded, watching me. His face was long and pale, not sickly, just distant. Like he wasn't entirely here, or maybe I wasn't. George Holbrook, he said, voice low and even, like a prayer whispered through stone. I nodded, throat suddenly dry. Your brother Verde? He didn't blink. We've been expecting you. The way he said, we made the hairs on my arms rise. I looked around again. Still no one else. I came for peace, I said. To write. To be left alone. Brother Verde smiled, but it didn't touch his eyes. Peace is found here, if one listens closely. He turned and walked through the archway without another word. I followed, because I had nowhere else to go. The interior of the monastery was colder than the mountain air. No electricity. Candles burned low in iron sconces. The air was thick with the smell of wax, damp stone, and something else, something sour, like dried herbs ground too fine and left to rot. He led me down a narrow hall, our footsteps echoing with strange rhythm. My room was a cell, plain and clean, with a small writing desk, a bed made of wood and rough wool, and a single window facing the northern ridge. Meals are at dusk. You may wander as you please, but stay within the walls after dark. I turned. Why? His eyes, for the first time, seemed to see me fully. Because the mountain remembers. He closed the door behind him. I sat on the bed, too tired to unpack. My fingers found the corner of the letter, still tucked in my coat pocket. I unfolded it, ran my thumb across the name of the place again. The Monastery of the Hollow Heart. Outside, clouds rolled in like a tide. Somewhere far below, a low sound echoed through the valley. It almost sounded like chanting. But maybe I was imagining it. Maybe. I woke to cold stone and the scent of damp incense. The room they'd given me was bare, carved straight into the mountain, with no windows and only a narrow wooden door. My backpack sat where I'd left it the night before, untouched. There was a metal basin in the corner with still water that didn't reflect my face the way it should have. I washed anyway. When I stepped out into the hallway, the silence hit me. Not just quiet, emptiness. The kind that feels like the air is waiting for something. The corridor stretched long, with stone arches ribbing the ceiling like the spine of some ancient beast. Candles flickered in niches along the walls, casting long shadows. I saw no one at first, though I sensed movement, like someone had just stepped out of sight. I followed the hall, my boots echoing on the stone. Every few steps, I passed a door most closed, a few cracked open just enough to suggest eyes watching from within. I told myself it was imagination. Eventually, the passage opened into a cloister. Pale gray light filtered in from the open courtyard at the center, where gnarled trees twisted like bones under the sky. There I finally saw them. The monks. They moved slowly in silence. Their robes were the color of ash, their faces pale and hollow. Some walked with hands clasped, others knelt in still prayer, but none of them spoke. Not a whisper. Not even the scrape of shoes on stone. Just the wind, weaving between pillars. I approached a nearby monk, an older man with a face like cracked marble. He didn't look up when I greeted him. I tried again, louder this time, but he only blinked slowly, as if he hadn't heard me, or perhaps had forgotten how to react. "Do you speak English?" I asked, then added, "Romana?" "Nothing." He finally turned his head, not toward me, but toward the far archway where Brother Verde stood. The abbot was tall, robed in black unlike the others, and somehow untouched by dust or time. His face was clean-shaven, his skin oddly smooth. His eyes were dark, but not empty. They were studying, like he was taking measurements without a ruler. "George," he said warmly, and I noticed the monks around him pause their motions. "Not completely. Just enough. You slept well, I hope?" "Well enough," I replied. "Your brothers are quiet. They are bound by an ancient vow. Silence is part of our devotion. We give our voices to something greater." His words were simple, but they pulled at something in my chest, a strange tension. I glanced back at the monk who hadn't spoken to me. He was now kneeling in the center of the courtyard, his face turned toward the cold sky. "I didn't expect so many still lived here," I said. "A few remain. Many left. Some changed." "Changed?" Verde smiled. "It wasn't comforting. Peace is not for all men. Some lose themselves seeking it." He motioned for me to follow, and I did, unsure why. There was something about the way he moved, deliberate, slow, like he walked through a world thinner than ours. He led me through another corridor, this one narrower and darker. The air turned heavy. Dust danced in the candlelight, and carved into the stone walls were symbols, circles within spirals, eyes that bled into roots. "Are these religious symbols?" I asked. "Old prayers," he said. "From before the alphabet. This monastery is built on older bones than you realize, George." Something about the way he said my name made my skin crawl. Too soft. Too sure. We stopped at a doorway framed by carvings. Inside was a small refectory, plain wooden tables, a single iron pot bubbling over a quiet flame. A young monk stirred it slowly. His face was smooth but blank. No sign of thought behind the eyes. "Come. You must eat," Verde said. I sat. The soup was tasteless, watery but warm. I forced it down. Across from me a monk stared, not at me but through me. His lips moved faintly, like he was whispering a word he didn't dare say aloud. I looked away and tried to focus on the sound of the fire, the clink of a wooden spoon. "You said peace lives here," I said to Verde. "It does. But peace," he replied, "is not silence. It is surrender." I didn't know what to say to that. Something in his voice made my fingers tremble. That night, I returned to my room. The halls were darker. The candles had gone out. And in the distance, just for a moment, I thought I heard a chant begin. A low, deep murmur. A language I didn't know, yet felt lodged in my spine. As though I'd heard it before long ago, in a dream that hadn't ended. I turned to face the wall, pulled the blanket over my ears, and tried to pretend I had come here for peace. But peace had nothing to do with this place. The night I first heard the chanting, the wind died. It had been howling all day, carving through the pines, whispering against the stone walls of the monastery like an old dog scratching at the door. But when darkness settled over the mountain, everything went still. No rustling trees. No insects. Not even the creak of old wood. Just a silence, so deep it felt like I had fallen into a well. I couldn't sleep. My room, lit by a single wax candle, was cold enough that I could see my breath. The walls, thick as tombs, seemed to breathe with me, slow and quiet. I kept telling myself it was just the wind playing tricks, the altitude messing with my head. I'd only been at the monastery 2 days, and already I was seeing things in the corner of my vision that weren't there. I sat on the edge of the narrow bed, wrapped in my coat. My journal was open in my lap, half a sentence scrawled on the page. I hadn't written in hours. My thoughts had turned muddy, like something was swimming through them with slow, heavy strokes. That's when I heard it. Low at first. A sound you feel more than hear. It vibrated in my ribs like the dull hum of a faraway machine, or a massive creature groaning in its sleep. I stood, trying to place it. It wasn't coming from the wind, or the forest, or the walls. It was coming from beneath the floor. I pressed my ear against the cold stone. There. A rumble. Then voices. Chanting. Dozens of voices. Maybe more. Speaking in unison, slow and deep, in a language I didn't know, but somehow felt I'd heard before. Each syllable was drawn out like it was being pulled from somewhere unwilling. The words didn't sound human. They didn't even sound alive. They felt old, not just in age, but in origin, like they were meant for something that existed before the idea of language itself. I should have stayed in my room. I know that now. But curiosity does strange things to you when you're isolated, when your thoughts aren't entirely your own anymore. I took the candle and opened the door. The hallway was pitch black. The candlelight flickered as I stepped out, and I could swear the shadows recoiled from it. The chanting grew louder as I made my way toward the old stairwell I'd seen earlier, the one Verde had said was off-limits during the evening hours. Of course he had. The stairs groaned under my feet as I descended, deeper and deeper into the earth. The stone was damp. I could hear water dripping somewhere, echoing off the walls in slow, uneven drops. The chanting was clearer now. I could almost make out the words, though my mind twisted trying to understand them. They made no sense, yet they burrowed inside me. My hands began to shake. I felt something warm drip from my nose. I wiped it with the back of my hand. Blood. I should have turned around. I should have run. But I didn't. The staircase opened into a vast chamber carved into the bedrock. A circle of robed monks stood in the center, surrounding a sunken pit. None of them noticed me. Or if they did, they didn't care. Their hoods covered their faces. Their hands were raised. The chant continued, slow and steady. The air in the chamber vibrated. I stepped closer, trying to see what was in the pit. That's when one of them collapsed. He dropped like a puppet with its strings cut, slamming face first onto the stone. Blood spilled from his eyes and ears. The others never stopped chanting. I stumbled back. The monk on the floor twitched. His mouth opened and closed like he was trying to speak. But no sound came out, only a breath that stank of rot and earth and something else, something like sulfur and soil mixed with things that shouldn't exist. I ran. Up the stairs, through the dark halls, back to my room. I slammed the door and leaned against it, panting. The candle was almost gone. My hand still had blood on it. The chanting had stopped. I listened for a long time. Silence again. But it wasn't the same. This silence was full, thick, like something was listening back. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the window, staring out at the moonless forest, waiting for the sun. It never really rose that morning. The sky just lightened a little, like it was unsure if it should return. When I saw Brother Verde at breakfast, he smiled like nothing had happened. I wanted to ask him. I wanted to demand an explanation. But when I opened my mouth, the words didn't come out. Only a faint hum escaped my lips. And it sounded just like the chant. I woke to the sound of nothing. Not birds. Not wind. Just the stillness that seemed to hang in this place like a shroud. Every day at this monastery started the same, cold stone, breath like smoke, silence thick enough to choke on. But that morning I felt it deeper, like something behind the silence was watching, listening. I hadn't seen the monks since the chanting 2 nights ago. They'd vanished, or maybe I was being kept away from them. Verde always appeared when I started to explore too far. Always smiling, always calm. Like a patient host, or a spider who had learned to smile. That morning, I wandered into the library again. The library was unlike any I'd seen. It smelled of damp wood and old meat. The shelves were made of black-stained oak, groaning under the weight of forgotten volumes. Every book was old, some handwritten, others bound in materials I didn't want to guess at. No titles on the spines, just marks, scratchings, sometimes a handprint burned into the leather. But I found it by accident. There was a narrow hallway at the back of the library, almost hidden behind a curtain of hanging roots. They'd broken through the stone wall, twisting like veins through the air. I thought it was just structural damage, but behind the roots was a door. Heavy, wooden, no handle. It opened when I touched it. The room beyond wasn't on the monastery's maps. I'd checked. It was small and circular, with walls that leaned in at the top, like the room had been built to press down on itself. The light from my lantern flickered strangely, like something in the room didn't want to be seen. There was only one object inside, a pedestal, and on it, a single book. It didn't look like much at first. Thin, black leather, stitched by hand. No title, no decoration. But when I got closer, I saw the leather was covered in indentations, as if dozens of fingers had clawed at it over centuries. The corners were cracked and peeling. The pages were yellowed and curled like dried leaves. I opened it. The first page was blank. So was the second. But on the third, there was writing. Tiny, tight letters that crawled across the page in a language I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was Latin, but the letters were wrong. Bent in ways that felt unnatural, like they were meant to be spoken more than read. My hands began to sweat. I turned another page. The symbols swam under my eyes. I blinked hard. The letters seemed to pulse. My vision blurred, and suddenly I wasn't just reading, I was hearing them. A low whisper, far away. The sound of something old and patient breathing between the words. Then I turned to a page that wasn't blank, but wasn't written either. It held a face. Not drawn. Not photographed. It was pressed, as if someone's face had been pushed into the page from the other side. The eyes were closed. The mouth open in a silent scream. I dropped the book. The whispering stopped. I stared at it on the floor. The pages flipped themselves, one by one, as though a breeze passed through the sealed room. I backed away. But before I could leave, something on the last page caught my eye. A name. It was written in English, scrawled in the bottom corner in red ink, or maybe something worse. G. Holbrook. My name. I didn't remember writing it. I closed the book carefully and put it back on the pedestal. As soon as I did, the air in the room seemed to settle. But when I turned to leave, I noticed something else. A word, carved into the back of the door, only visible in the lantern light. Shergalduth. 3 syllables. The same ones I'd heard in the monk's chant. The same ones that haunted my dreams. I left the room. I didn't tell Verde. I didn't sleep that night. And when I closed my eyes, I felt the face in the book pressing back against the inside of my skull. Something had learned my name. And now, I think it was trying to remember its own. I woke to the sound of whispering, low, broken syllables drifting through the cracks in my cell door. The candle beside my bed had long since burned out. My watch had stopped. There was no sunlight yet, just the faint blue breath of dawn against the small, barred window. I listened. The voices weren't the chants this time. They were quieter, uneven, human. I pulled on my coat and opened the door slowly. The hallway outside was empty, save for shadows and that persistent whispering, now softer, like it had noticed me listening. I followed it barefoot down the cold stone corridor, past the chapel, past the sealed library with its strange door and iron lock, until I reached a side hall I hadn't seen before. There, kneeling on the floor in front of an arched wooden door, was one of the younger monks. He looked no older than 20. His robe hung loosely on his frame, as if he'd been starving. His head was shaved, but not cleanly. Patches of hair stuck out here, and they're like tufts of moss. His eyes darted up when he saw me, wide with fear. I stopped a few feet away. "Are you all right?" I whispered. He didn't speak. Instead, he pressed one finger to his lips, then pointed behind him toward the door. Then he reached into the folds of his robe and handed me something, a small, leather-bound notebook, worn and cracking at the edges. I took it carefully. He gestured again, urgently, then turned and vanished into the corridor like smoke. Just like that, back in my cell, I lit a fresh candle and opened the notebook. Each page was covered in small, frantic handwriting, some of it smudged by water or blood. I couldn't tell which. The first few pages were just dates and lines of scripture. But then, further in, the words changed. The voice below grows stronger. The chants are not prayers, they are instructions. I see him in my sleep. Eyes like wells, hands too long. He speaks in a tongue I never learned, but I understand him. Brother Verde says the chants keep the thing sealed. But it doesn't feel like we're keeping it out. It feels like we're letting it in. I flipped to the last page. There, in shaky handwriting, were just 4 words. I cut my tongue. I stared at the page for a long time. Then I looked closer. Tucked inside the back cover, half glued to the leather, was something wrapped in cloth. My hands shook as I unwrapped it. It was exactly what I feared. Dried, shriveled, blackened with time. A tongue. I dropped the bundle and stepped back, bile rising in my throat. It hit the stone floor with a soft, horrible thud. The candle flickered. Something passed over the flame, just a breeze maybe. Or a breath. That night I didn't sleep. But in the silence, when all the monks were tucked away in their stone rooms, I thought I heard someone crying in the walls. A soft, choking sound. And underneath it, just barely, the beginning of a chant. I don't remember falling asleep. One moment I was staring at the cracked stone ceiling of my room, watching candlelight flicker in long, dancing shadows. The next, I was somewhere else, somewhere far colder and far deeper. I stood barefoot in a tunnel made of bone. It stretched in every direction. Rib cages curved overhead like the arches of a church. The floor was slick with something black that pulsed under my feet, warm as blood. The walls breathed. I could hear it, in out, slow and wet. And then I heard the voice. It wasn't speaking to me. It was speaking through me. The words passed my lips even though my mouth didn't move. A language I couldn't understand, but somehow new. The syllables scratched the inside of my skull, long and sharp and low, like stones dragged across metal. Shirgalduth. I don't know what it means. But I woke up sweating, mouth full of copper, blood trickling from my nose onto the front of my shirt. It wasn't the first time I'd had nightmares in this place. But this was different. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt like a lesson. I sat up in the cot, the sheets damp and twisted around my legs. My hands were shaking. I wrote down the word before I forgot it, even though my fingers trembled so badly I could barely hold the pen. Shirgalduth. When I whispered it aloud, just once, the candle beside my bed flared, like it had heard me. The flame turned blue. Then it went out. Darkness rushed in like water. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The shadows pressed against me, thick and heavy, like smoke with fingers. I reached for the matches and fumbled to relight the candle, heart pounding in my throat. When the light returned, something was waiting. On the stone wall across the room, right above the wooden crucifix, was a smear. It hadn't been there the day before. It looked like someone had drawn a symbol with ash and something darker, thicker. The mark was crude but deliberate. A circle split in two by a jagged line, like a mouth tearing itself open. I approached it slowly, like it might vanish if I got too close. But it didn't. I touched the wall. It was still warm. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat by the candle with the blanket around my shoulders, eyes wide open, writing everything I could remember into my notebook. The tunnel of bones. The chanting. The word. The breathing. The thing I never saw but knew was there, behind me watching. Always just behind me. I've studied folklore for years. I've read about dream languages, possession, glossolalia, trance states, but this isn't the same. This isn't human. This isn't psychological. This isn't myth. This is something older. And it knows I'm here. At dawn, the bells rang for morning prayer. I didn't go. Instead, I listened through the cracks in my door as the monks filed past in silence. But they weren't whispering prayers. They were chanting, and I understood a single word. Not with my ears, but with the hollow space behind my ribs, the part of me that remembers grief better than sound. Shirgalduth. They were saying its name, again and again, like it was the only name that ever mattered. And I whispered it too, not because I wanted to, because part of me already belongs to it. I found him alone in the candle chapel, seated beneath the broken crucifix. Brother Verde. Always calm. Always watching. The flames danced on the cold stone walls, casting long shadows that looked like grasping fingers. The crucifix above him was ancient, blackened with time. Christ's face had been worn smooth by centuries of candle smoke and, somehow, tears. He didn't look up as I stepped inside. "You've been exploring," he said softly. It wasn't a question. His voice echoed gently in the chapel, carried on the stale air like the tail end of a whisper. I froze, halfway between the door and the altar. "Curiosity," I replied, trying to keep my tone light. "Occupational hazard." He turned to face me slowly. His eyes were dark, not brown, but something deeper, almost like ink soaking through paper. "Curiosity," he repeated, nodding. "The first sin of man." There was a silence between us then, long and heavy. I could hear the wind sighing against the ancient stones outside, could feel the weight of the mountain pressing inward. I sat in the pew closest to him, my fingers gripping the edge of the wood. It was slick with old wax. "I've read parts of the manuscript you keep hidden in the library," I said. My voice came out quieter than I intended. "The one bound in goatskin. The language, it's not listed in any lexicon." Verde smiled, not with joy, but with something that looked like pity. "You wouldn't find it there. It is not a language of man." I leaned forward. "Then what is it?" He paused, as if deciding how much to give me. Then he stood and walked toward the altar. From beneath it, he pulled a small wooden box, lacquered with age and bound with twine. He opened it slowly and took out a thin scroll. The parchment looked fragile, as if it might crumble into dust with a breath. "This was given to us by the first keeper, passed from voice to voice. A memory etched in language older than the sea, older than time." He handed it to me. My hands trembled. I didn't understand the words, but my mind recoiled from them. The letters twisted as I read them, curling, shifting, slipping out of focus like oil in water. "What does it say?" I whispered. Verde folded his hands in front of him. He looked tired for the first time. "It is a hymn," he said, "but not of worship. A containment. Each syllable is a lock. Each breath a chain. We chant to keep it asleep. To keep it buried." "What is it?" His eyes moved to the cracked floor beneath us. "It has no name in your tongue. But if I were to try, it would be Shirgalduth. The one beneath. A coldness gripped my spine. I remembered the dreams. The pit. The breathing stone. And you're guarding it? I asked. He smiled again. Sadder this time. No, George. We are not guarding it. We are binding it. Every dawn and dusk. Every breath we take is borrowed from its sleep. I couldn't speak. Verde stepped closer. You must understand, he said softly. You were not called here by mistake. The chant reacts to you. The language moves through you. You are of the old blood. I stood up, too quickly. The chapel spun around me. You think I'm part of this? You are part of it, he said. Not by belief. By design. I shook my head. No. I came here to write. To heal. I lost. I know, he interrupted. She died. And you thought silence would help. But grief calls to old places. You were heard, George. I backed away, heart pounding. The scroll slipped from my hand and landed on the stone floor without a sound. Stay, he said gently. There's more to see. More to remember. I turned and left the chapel, nearly running. I didn't look back at Verde. But as I climbed the stairs to my room, I could still hear his voice echoing behind me. You cannot unhear the chant, George. Once it enters you, it never leaves. And God help me. He was right. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember the chanting, low, slow, endless, somewhere deep beneath my room. It had pulsed through the stone walls like a second heartbeat. I lay awake for hours listening, trying to convince myself it was wind through the cracks, or some strange echo in this ancient place. But I knew better. When I finally rose, it was still dark, though my watch claimed it was morning. The candle on my desk had burned out. I lit another. Its flame shook even though there was no draft. Something in me pulled downward. The monastery was silent. The halls, usually patrolled by monks in stiff silence, were empty. Their doors were shut, locked, or sealed. I should have turned around. I should have packed and left. But curiosity is a sickness I've never shaken. And something else, deeper, had rooted itself in me. A voice I couldn't hear with my ears, but felt in my blood. It wanted me below. There was a hallway I had passed many times, but never noticed. It curved slightly to the left, just enough to make you believe it ended in a wall. But tonight, there was a faint orange glow leaking from beneath a heavy wooden door. The kind of glow firelight gives off when it's not quite fire. The door creaked as I pushed it open. Stairs. Worn, uneven, and narrow. Spiraling down into darkness. I lit a second candle and held them both in front of me. The air smelled of damp stone and something else. Something sweet and rotten, like old fruit left in a coffin. The further I descended, the warmer it got. By the 50th step, sweat was gathering at the base of my neck. By the 100th, it was as if I had stepped into a different climate altogether. And then I heard it. Breathing. Not mine. The staircase ended in a chamber carved from black stone, too smooth, too perfect to be made by human hands. The floor was a ring, surrounding a wide pit in the center. The pit was maybe 30 feet across and rimmed with strange markings, etched deep into the floor. They pulsed, not with light, but with something else. A rhythm. A pattern. I crouched near the edge and felt the air rising from the pit. It came in slow bursts, like something massive below was asleep and breathing. Inhale. Wait. Exhale. Wait. The sound was soft, but wrong. Too wet. Too deep. I leaned forward to look inside. There was no bottom. Just blackness. Not the kind of black you get in shadow or caves. This black moved. It shimmered. It felt alive. I thought I saw shapes inside it. Arms too long, eyes that blinked sideways. I told myself it was the candlelight. I told myself many things and believed none of them. Then I heard my name. George. Soft. Direct. Like it was whispered just behind my ear. I turned. No one. The name came again, but now it was inside my head. George. I stood. Backed away from the pit. George, you've come so far. That voice didn't belong to anyone I knew. It wasn't male or female. It was ancient, as if a memory had learned how to speak. I dropped one of the candles. It hit the floor with a splash. There was no water. I turned and ran. Up the stairs. Up and up, candlelight flickering wildly. The warm air turned cold again as I reached the upper halls, but the breath in my lungs stayed hot and heavy, like I had run through fire. When I reached my room, I bolted the door and leaned against it. Silence. But not peace. That breathing, deep, slow, deliberate, still echoed in my chest, even though I'd left the pit behind. That night, I dreamed of a black star falling through the sky, and when it hit the earth, it did not break, it opened. And something climbed out. Something that had waited a very, very long time. I marked the trees with my knife. 3 clean lines, deep in the bark, slashes like tally marks. I made them wide enough that even if moss grew overnight, I'd still recognize them. I wasn't just being careful. I was being desperate. Because every time I tried to leave the monastery, I ended up back at the gate. I'd hike for hours, dragging my pack, ignoring the cuts on my palms from climbing through bramble. I'd curse the wind when it shifted, curse the map, curse whatever game Verde was playing. But each time, I'd break through the undergrowth to find myself standing beneath the same stone arch, with the same carved cross cracked down the middle. I started to suspect the mountain wasn't letting me leave. That morning, the sky was wrong. It was still early, maybe 10 o'clock, but the sun looked dull and far away, like a bulb behind thick glass. The air felt thick, too, like syrup in my lungs. I watched the monks shuffle across the courtyard in silent lines, their heads bowed, lips moving in rhythm, but no sound coming out. It was more disturbing than the chants. At least when they chanted, I could pretend they were human. Now they were like shadows in robes, mouthing secrets into the fog. I found Brother Iosif in the eastern cloister. He was the youngest, the one with no tongue. He sat with a small wooden bowl in his lap, carving lines into the stone floor with a sharp bone. His eyes met mine, wide and bloodshot, and he shook his head fast when I asked him if the eclipse had begun. He held up his hand and pointed to the sky with trembling fingers. I looked up. The moon was already there. Big. Black. Wrong. It shouldn't have been there yet, not this early. It looked closer than normal, like it was leaning down to listen. A cold breeze slid down my spine. I turned to Iosif. What happens when the moon covers the sun? I asked. He didn't write anything. He didn't gesture. He just started to cry. I went to find Verde. He was in the chapel, kneeling before the broken altar. Candles surrounded him, hundreds of them, melting in odd colors, deep green, oily blue, a red that shimmered like fresh blood. He didn't look up when I stepped inside. "You're not going to stop this," he said. "I can try," I said, though it sounded pathetic even to me. Verde turned his head slowly, the way animals do when they hear a sound they already expected. His eyes weren't glowing or anything ridiculous like that. They were worse. Calm. Human. Filled with belief. "You were never meant to run," he said. "This place chose you. And you came willingly." He was right. I had come. I followed that damn letter, thinking I was chasing peace. Truth. Closure. Maybe even death, if I'm being honest with myself. But I never expected this. The floor rumbled beneath us. Just slightly, but enough that the candles trembled. "Shirgalduth stirs beneath the stone," Verde whispered. "He listens now." That name again. Always in whispers. Always too heavy for the air. I backed out of the chapel and ran, not caring where, just away. The monastery corridors stretched longer than they should. Some doors opened into stairwells that hadn't been there before. I slammed one shut behind me and found myself outside again, at the same courtyard. Same monks. Still walking. But one of them had collapsed. He was twitching, limbs stiff, eyes wide and staring at the sky. Blood trickled from his ears. Smoke, yes, smoke, rose from his robe. No one stopped. The other monks just stepped around him and kept walking. I dropped beside him. He was still breathing, but barely. His mouth opened, and for the first time, I heard him speak. Not a chant, not a prayer. Just one broken word. "Run." That was when the bell began to toll. Not the chapel bell. That one had cracked and fallen decades ago. No, this was a deeper sound, older, as if the mountain itself had struck some hidden, buried gong. It rang through my ribs. It made my teeth hurt. And the sun was fading. The moon was swallowing it whole, and shadows started to move even where there was no light. The eclipse had begun, and something beneath the monastery was waking up. The morning after the monk burst into flames, I woke up to silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that made the skin on my arms prickle like a warning. The bells hadn't rung. There was no sound of movement in the halls. No chanting. No wind. Just the crushing stillness of stone and fog. I lay still in my cot, barely breathing. For a moment, I thought I might be dead. Then I saw it. There, directly beneath my bed frame, carved into the stone floor, was a symbol. I hadn't noticed it before. I should have. It wasn't small. It was carved deeply, a spiral of jagged lines and sharp turns, almost like a star coiled in on itself. I pulled the bed aside, knelt down, and brushed the dust away. The more I looked, the more the line seemed to pulse, very faintly, as if the symbol were remembering itself. And then I knew. Not from logic. Not from evidence. But from somewhere deep in my bones, from the place that doesn't speak in words. It was a sigil. A seal. And I was tied to it. I felt sick. Not from fear. From recognition. This wasn't the first time I'd seen it. I had drawn this once before, years ago, without knowing what it was. During a fever dream after my fiancée's funeral. I'd sketched it in the margins of a notebook, thought it was nonsense. But it was this exact symbol. Every curve. Every edge. I stood up, heart thudding, and left the room. The halls were empty. The monastery felt wrong, like something was leaning over it, waiting for it to breathe again. I passed through the cloisters, the shadows bending longer than they should have. I went looking for Verde. He found me instead. He stood by the ancient fountain in the center courtyard, hands folded, eyes closed as if in prayer. But when I approached, he opened his eyes and smiled before I could say a word. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked gently. I didn't answer. "You felt it," he continued, voice low, almost tender. "The blood remembers." "What is it?" I finally said. My voice felt small in that stone courtyard. Verde looked up toward the clouds. "A lock," he said. "Carved into this mountain by hands older than your language. A lock built on flesh and lineage." I felt dizzy. "Why under my bed?" "Because the seal is bound to your family," he said, looking at me with something close to reverence. "You were always meant to come back." "I'm not from here." "No," he agreed, "but your blood is." He reached into his robes and pulled out a brittle page wrapped in cloth. He handed it to me. It was a drawing, faded, ancient. A group of robed figures surrounding the same sigil, drawn in what looked like dried blood. But it wasn't the symbol that made my stomach lurch. It was the face of the man in the center. The one holding the blade. The one who carved the seal. He looked like me. Not exactly. But close enough to recognize the shape of my jaw. The narrow eyes. The same scar above the eyebrow, which I got from falling off a bike when I was 10. My voice shook. "What is this?" "Your ancestor," Verde said. "The first to bind the screaming star. He gave up everything, his name, his family, his life, to stop it from awakening. But locks rust, George. Seals weaken, especially without fresh blood to feed them." I backed away. No, this isn't possible. You're lying." "I told you from the start," he said calmly. "You were brought here by Providence. Not chance. You came looking for peace. But what you carry in your blood is not peace. It is purpose." I turned to leave, but the world tilted. Not metaphorically. The monastery tilted beneath my feet. I fell hard, the page fluttering from my hands, and the air around us groaned like it had lungs. Verde didn't move. His robes flowed in the shifting air as if underwater. His eyes were fixed on something I couldn't see. "The seal is breaking," he said. "You feel it, don't you? The heartbeat beneath the stone? It's waking, George. And only you can open the final gate." "I won't," I said, staggering upright. His voice turned colder. "You will." He stepped closer. "Because if you don't, it will take everything. Your mind. Your memories. Even her." And suddenly he was holding something. A pendant. Silver. Worn and dented. It was hers. My fiancée's. I hadn't seen it since she was buried. I'd never told anyone what it looked like. How did you get that?" I choked out. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The monastery groaned again, louder this time. The sigil burned beneath my feet. Not with fire, but with something older than flame. And then I heard the chanting begin again. Distant. Rising. Not from the monks. From below. From the pit. From the thing that remembered me. And suddenly I understood what Verde meant. I wasn't just tied to the seal. I was the seal. And I was cracking. The air was thicker than smoke. It didn't feel like air at all. It clung to my skin, hot and heavy, like something alive was breathing beside me, pressing in against my face. I stood in the center of the crypt, and even though my candle was burning, the flame didn't flicker. There was no wind. Just silence. An unnatural kind. A silence so deep it made my ears ring. And then the chanting began. I didn't hear it with my ears at first. It started inside my chest like a second heartbeat. Low and slow. Words that weren't words. A rhythm that didn't match any human tongue. It twisted through me like a snake of sound, coiling around my spine, humming behind my teeth. The monks had gathered in a perfect circle around the old stone pit, hooded, swaying. Their faces were in shadow, but I could see their mouths moving. I counted 12 of them. Verde was at the center, barefoot, robes soaked in something dark. His eyes met mine and he smiled, not cruelly, not warmly. Just knowingly. Like this had all already happened. You feel it now, don't you? He said, his voice soft beneath the chanting. The name beneath your skin. It wants out. I tried to speak, but my voice cracked. My throat was dry, my hands shaking. The ground under my feet pulsed once. A low thud, like a giant heartbeat under the stone. I took a step forward, then another. My legs didn't feel like mine. I wanted to run, but it was like walking underwater. Every movement was slow, strained. My thoughts were coming apart, like someone had taken a knife to my memories, cutting them into ribbons. I dreamed of her again last night, I said, barely hearing myself. She spoke to me, but it wasn't her. Not really. Verde tilted his head. No, it wasn't. The being knows your grief. It wears her like a mask. I closed my eyes. The image of her face was still fresh, Emma, my fiancée. Her eyes were wrong. Too wide. Her smile didn't reach her cheeks. And she spoke in that language. The same language the monks were chanting now. I dropped to my knees. My head was spinning. The pit began to glow faintly at the edges, like red light seeping through cracked earth. I could hear whispering now, louder than the chanting. Names I didn't know. Or maybe they were mine. Forgotten versions of myself. You don't have to fight it, Verde said, kneeling beside me. You were born for this. Your ancestors gave their blood to seal the being. Yours will set it free. Why me? I asked, tears running down my cheeks. I didn't ask for this. I just wanted peace. Verde put a hand on my shoulder. His fingers were cold. Too cold. Peace is a lie. What you sought was silence. And this silence, he gestured to the pit, is eternal. The monks began to chant faster. Louder. The stone around the pit cracked. Red light poured upward, and heat followed. My skin prickled, my nose filled with the scent of ash and something ancient, something wrong. Suddenly the ground shifted. Not shook, shifted. Like it wasn't solid anymore. Like we were standing on the back of something moving beneath us. I stumbled to my feet, heart racing. The pit split open. A column of black mist rose, spinning like a tornado. Shapes formed inside, arms that bent the wrong way, mouths with too many teeth. And eyes. Dozens of them, staring straight at me. Then I heard my name. Not the one I go by. Not George. But the name buried in my bones. Something older. Something deeper. The being in the pit was calling me. I screamed. Not in fear, but in rage. In grief. In defiance. I ran forward. Verde tried to stop me, but I pushed past him. My body was burning from the inside out, my blood boiling. I wasn't thinking anymore. Just acting. I stepped to the edge of the pit and stared into the thing that should not exist. Take me, I said. But it ends with me. The creature paused. For one terrifying second, all was still. The monks stopped chanting. The air stopped moving. Time itself froze. Then it rushed in. The black mist wrapped around me, seeping into my eyes, my ears, my mouth. It filled me with 1,000 voices, 1,000 memories that weren't mine. My mind cracked. My vision went white, then red, then nothing at all. But I held on to one thing. One memory. Emma's smile, before everything went wrong. I whispered her name, and the creature shrieked. It wasn't a sound, it was a rupture. The crypt shook. The monks screamed and caught fire, their robes turning to ash. Verde fell to his knees, eyes wide with betrayal. No, he cried. You were the vessel. I laughed. Or maybe I screamed. I don't know anymore. But I knew this. I wasn't going to let that thing loose on the world. So I made a choice. I took it with me. And everything went dark. The chanting stopped. It was like someone had slammed a heavy door shut in my mind. One moment, the air was filled with that guttural, scraping language that made my bones feel like wetwood, chanting that sounded less like voices and more like the earth cracking. Then silence. Not peace. Silence. There's a difference. I lay on the cold stone floor, my back twisted, breath shallow, body shaking. My hands were covered in blood, some of it mine, some of it not. The walls around me pulsed faintly, like the monastery itself was catching its breath. Or grieving. The pit was sealed now. I could feel it in my chest, like a door slammed and locked behind my heart. Whatever was beneath, Shirgalduth, the sleeping star, the hollow flame, it was quiet again. Not gone. Just waiting. Like it always had been. I don't remember exactly how I did it. Maybe I didn't do anything at all. Maybe I was just the right shape at the right time. Maybe that's all anyone ever is. Brother Verde was gone. Not dead, just gone. I saw him right before the chanting ended. His smile had split too wide, his face stretching like wax. And then light. A burst of white that wasn't light at all, more like forgetting. When it cleared, there was no trace of him. Only his robes, neatly folded on the altar. Dry. Dustless. I wanted to cry. I think I did. But even my tears felt empty, like everything inside me had been hollowed out and packed with someone else's silence. I wandered the monastery halls for hours, maybe days. There was no sun now. Just soft, constant twilight. The monks didn't speak anymore. They didn't move. They sat in a perfect circle in the old dining hall, heads bowed, eyes open but unfocused. As if their minds had been left behind somewhere during the ritual. I tried to speak to them. Nothing. I was alone again. Outside, the forest had returned. The mist was thinner. Birds had come back, small ones with jittery wings. I saw a fox once, darting between trees. Life, trembling and cautious, testing the edges of something new. I should have left. I could have. But I didn't. Because somehow I knew, if I left, I'd take it with me. The thing in the pit. The voice behind the voice. It had crawled up into my head during the final chant, and though I slammed the door on it, some part of it clung to me still. Like ash in the lungs. So I stayed. I don't pray. I don't chant. I don't speak. I just walk the halls, clean the dust, light the candles. The monks remain in their circle. The pit remains sealed. And I remain. Still. One day someone will come. A hiker, a lost tourist, someone looking for quiet. They'll find the journal I've been writing. The pages will be worn. The ink will bleed. But they'll read it. And as they read, the silence will shift. They'll hear it too. That sound. The sound that isn't a sound. A voice from beneath the stone, whispering in a language older than man. And it will begin again. Because peace, I've learned, was never meant for the living.